Samantha Kotlik.
And I'm Mairead Smilik.
And we're here today with Anthony from Building Performance Solutions. And Anthony is going to talk to us today about something that makes buyers run for the hills, and that is the dreaded M word, mold. Anthony, thank you so much for coming in and speaking to us today. This is such a hot topic, particularly in Florida where we have moisture in our air, and we just want to get some insights and some expert tips from you to really help our customers when they're buying and selling properties.
There is mold in Florida, but how many different types of mold are there actually in Florida?
There's over 100,000 different types of mold.
So out of that 100,000, how many types of mold are really scary or toxic?
There are 5 different toxic molds that we look for inside someone's indoor air quality.
Right, and that's going to be the black molds that people tend to get afraid of.
Generally, they say black mold, right? When you hear black mold, I know from doing this that the average person is referring to a toxic mold. Not all molds are toxic. You're gonna have mold inside most environments. You know, the key is that we look for is what are the counts? You know, what are the counts indoor as compared to outdoor? There are a couple zero tolerance molds. That's Stachybotrys and Chaetonium.
Okay.
Both of those molds, we want those to be 0 inside.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that leads me on to my next question. If we're working with a buyer and they have their home inspection and, you know, something's detected, some organic growth, as we usually call it, is detected, what should our next steps be to advise our buyer to, you know, deal with that?
The most important thing is know who's doing your testing, okay? Know
Good
who's
point.
doing your testing.
Yep.
Because you can see something, and this has happened to me in my career, I've seen something visually that I swore was mold.
Yep.
I didn't say anything, but I swore in my heart of hearts it was mold. I took a tape lift, I sent it to the lab, it came back, guess what? It wasn't mold.
Okay.
So I wouldn't panic until I sent my samples off to the lab and the lab sends back what I have. Number one, is it a toxic mold?
Mm-hmm.
If it is a toxic mold, what are my counts?
Okay.
And what are my counts compared to outside? And if it is a toxic mold, where is it in the house? Is it contained to a small area that can be easily remediated?
Yeah.
And do you think it's smart to have the same company test for mold and then the same company do the remediation work, or would you separate that up as 2 completely different jobs?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So number one, in the state of Florida, it is against the law. It is conflict of interest for the same company to do the testing and do the remediation. I would advise against that. I also am a big fan of hiring either a licensed assessor or an industrial hygienist to do your testing. I think that home inspectors are absolutely great at what they do, but I tend to look at a home inspector like a general contractor. He knows a little bit about everything, and he doesn't specialize in that. Your assessor, your mold assessor, is capable of writing a protocol, which is really, really important should you need remediation.
Okay.
And speaking of remediation, do you see that some companies are over remediating because they want to make sure that the problem is treated, but probably in a way that is not fair to the customer or the client?
That does happen. It happens often, unfortunately. A lot of your bigger franchise companies have franchise fees that they have to meet. So especially if they do the tear out and the put back. So I have seen in my own experience where I wrote a protocol and they went beyond my protocol, did more than what they were supposed to do. And that's probably because they also get paid to do the rebuild.
Essentially scaring someone and charging them, you know, money that they don't need to pay.
I don't know about the scaring part, but you know, like for me, if I have companies that I trust and I refer, if I refer you out and you open up a wall and you see more than what I found, my companies know to take a picture and send that to me so I have documentation so I can go back out and adjust my protocol.
Yep. That's great. So if we're working with a buyer and, you know, we're showing them a new construction property and they buy a new construction property, does that mean they don't have to worry about mold? Should everything be perfect and they can just assume that they're not going to get mold?
Absolutely not, but that is assumption, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. So last quarter, last year, and already this year, I've done a lot of testing on brand new construction here in Sarasota, and unfortunately there is mold.
Yeah.
So, but the good news with that is if you detect it before the drywall is put up, it's an easy correction. You can easily correct that. Once the drywall goes up and that microbial growth or mold growth is on the wood stud or on the truss, it's much harder to remediate.
Yeah,
Which is why when you're
sounds
buying new in construction, the best thing to do is to have a pre-drywall inspection if you have the opportunity and it's not already built, because then you can alleviate so many of these problems and it doesn't turn into a bigger problem than it needs to be.
So you and I have had a conversation about that before, and you told me you did that. So I do have to say absolutely kudos to you for doing that, because there's not a lot of realtors that do that, and that's an extra step you go to protecting your client.
Yeah.
So definitely kudos to you on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Now, one last question. Many people in Florida don't live in Florida full time. They'll come, they'll enjoy our beautiful winters here, and then in the summer months, when it gets hot and humid, they zip off to wherever they're going. So if someone's going to leave their property empty throughout the summer months, what should they be doing to try and give themselves a fighting chance to not get mold and moisture while they're away?
So for years we used something called a device called a dehumidistat, square box with a round knob, but I think a lot of the problem for that is you ask multiple different AC contractors and they'll all give you a different number, or somebody might not remember what they heard and they might put it on 75 instead of 65. and it's not just that, you have to set the thermostat properly too, and a lot of people get confused about that, right? So you tell the homeowner, hey, put the dehumidistat on 60 or 65%, put the thermostat on 78 degrees. What, 78 degrees? That's hot, I'm gonna have a problem.
Yeah.
They don't understand that the dehumidistat is in control now, not the thermostat. So my recommendation is that if you're seasonal, I would contact an air conditioning company or air conditioning contractor that specializes in professional dehumidifiers and the installation of professional dehumidifiers, and I would have a professional dehumidifier installed. It's going to cost you between maybe $4,000 and $5,000 to have that installed.
Okay.
A small remediation can cost you up to about $10,000.
Yeah, so it's
Small.
preventative
Yes.
rather than reacting after the problem occurs. That's really good to know.
Turn your water heater off.
And then what about
turn your water
Turn your water heater off.
what about the switch on the fan that you addressed earlier?
So for those of your clients that are moving down here from the north, okay, a lot of them back up north, they would put their fan on and they would run their fan constantly, and they would open their windows and their doors, and that would help circulate the air throughout the house. The problem in our state is you can't do that. If you put the fan on, it's going to wick moisture off the evaporator coil, and I could go into the scientific, but we don't have time for that. I will just tell you that if you leave the fan on, there's no dehumidification. So you could have humidity upwards to 70, 80%. You'll have what we call a humidity bloom, and within 24 to 48 hours, mold can germinate.
Okay.
Wow, there's a lot that we have to be very, very careful of, but I think the good news is that finding mold should not be a deal breaker. It can be easily remediated using an expert company. And have a good agent that's going to look after your interests and help you find those experts to deal with those issues as they arrive. So thank you, Anthony.
Thank you for having me. I
Thank
appreciate
you so
it.
much.
It was very helpful.
And if anyone wants Anthony's details, you can contact us and we'll happily pass those on.